physical, mental. I didn't hear all of what was discussed. Social, spiritual, right? Like we can kind of like our topic, our conversation can kind of like walk through the different domains as like a practical guide. I liked what you're saying about building a routine, like for taking care of yourself, like day to day. I think that kind of helps ground us individually.
Yes, because it's something about like a routine that is just like Jasmine. When you were over to Jasmine, was like, oh, routine could be every Thursday or whatnot. But like I follow those pages on Instagram, you know, that we probably all follow, like the wealth pages and whatnot. And it's hard. Like the certain 1% of people do these things because it's hard to wake up every morning at 6 o'clock. And like, I don't care if I went to bed at 2 o'clock. I'm waking up at 6 o'clock. I'm journaling. I'm going for a 30-minute walk. I'm spending time with Jesus. Then I'm starting my day at 8 o'clock or whatnot. Like, if it was easy, all of us would be doing it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And like for me, like, I don't know. I think I have ADHD. I don't know. Are we recording?
I whispered to him, I was like, are we recording?
He said, any doctors that want to sponsor Devin's accurate diagnosis.
Yeah. So like building routines is notoriously hard for me. Like it's been an obstacle since I was a kid. Like, I'll start, like, let's say I'm getting dressed for a church. Like I have my shirt on and I don't have my socks on yet. Or I'm like, okay, let's do it this way. I have my socks on. I have my pants on, but putting on the shirt it makes more sense because you get to, but I've never developed like these routines. It's like things just happen, right? So I started like,
oh yeah, you might.
Yeah, I might pray for me, y'all.
Does your brain like? Never mind. I'm not gonna
ask it. Please.
I know.
Does your brain like go faster? Like when someone's talking, do you already have the sentence like in your head, like ready to go?
Let me tell you.
Oh yeah, you might have it.
Let me tell you.
Yeah, we need to talk to.
You know how sometimes I talk fast and I'll stutter a little bit?
Yeah.
Because my brain is gone.
Yeah.
It's gone.
It's
you know?
annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might.
Yeah.
It's okay. That's funny.
I made it through so much school. Like, it's really shocking how much school I made it through having ADHD.
Honestly, yeah. The fact that you made it all the way through like med school and everything. Like,
Maybe because it was the amount of self-care you were
I was
implementing.
playing video games too late.
Maybe that was a form of you had an outlet.
You know, yes, I had an outlet, right? Now, so in medicine, there's a therapeutic dose, the dose that works, and then there's a toxic dose, the dose that's too much and causes more side effects or more danger.
Yeah.
Self-care at a therapeutic dose is helpful. Self-care at a toxic dose is unhelpful.
Yeah.
So yes, video games unwinding for me, but it's kind of honestly a little bit crazy how much I played during pharmacy school and during undergrad.
My gosh.
And like, I'm a scroller on like social media. I'm a scroller. Guilty. I could easily lose 2 hours. Very easily. Like, it's not even funny. I could just go. So yeah, I'm unwinding. But am I unwinding or am I unraveling?
Now you're all the way unwound, right? The whole tube of floss is now.
It's gone. The floss is gone. It's on the table. It's now, you gotta throw it away. Like, wow. So how do we dose self-care?
You're not alone. I actually saw recently that there are a few myths out there about self-care, and one of them, self-care, is indulgence. And so when you were talking about the toxic level of self-care, we can overindulge. And I think that's why it's a good, awareness is why are we seeking... Now, I wouldn't even say seeking self-care. You don't have to necessarily seek it, but some people don't get to it till it's like,
right.
No, I need it. I need to find it.
Yeah.
But I think knowing what you are disconnecting from is important. So you know why you're like, why is this even... it doesn't have to be super deep, but it's like whatever you're using as your self-care, knowing what is it carrying to, what is it tending to for you. I think that's important. Then you can kind of, in moderation, even the word tells us, and I always think about this, nothing in excess like is good. That's how I figured out I had a food allergy, ate too much of something and then became allergic to it.
Wow.
But I believe that really is just a balance of everything, right? Like you can, whether it's food, whether it's an activity, something you enjoy, you can consume it and enjoy it. But too much of it could be now your time is out of balance. Maybe you have too much of a protein in your body because you ate something too much. You binge watch something on Netflix and so much time has passed and either you're sleep deprived or you're late. So it could literally be anything.
Right.
And so that's, things in moderation.
Yeah. And I think that's why time is one of the best elements used to like manage self-care, because once you have just like, even as far as like even newborns, like obviously I work with newborns. And so like the earliest form of love for a newborn is when you put them on a schedule. And like they tend to, they evolve healthily and like in their best when you get them on a routine and keep them on a routine, because then they like are like, okay, like I know this is the next step of the pattern of the day. And so like all of that still matters even today, because like if the first form of love is God like allowing like a parent or a caregiver to manage your time, then like in adulthood it's the same thing. Like managing your time is the first step of like learning to love yourself, because like once you have like a solid routine, then that's when you're able to not indulge. If you know I need a break, and so I get 15 minutes on social media, and you abide by that 15 minutes, that's where like you're able to like follow the right pattern. But again, like it's time, and time is going to be the most valuable asset of like, even when it comes to spiritual, mental, all of the elements of self-love, time is the only one that, not that matters, but it's the first step, because you need to manage like, even though God loves us, like you can't be in your Bible all day. You have to go to work. And then like you can't, like work out 4 hours a day because like you have other stuff to do, etc. So once you learn to like manage that, then you have like the blocks of the day to fit your self-care in. And then you thrive. To me, at least, that's when like you begin to thrive.
Yeah, let's kick this off formally. We've been chatting. We couldn't get enough of the self-care topic because it's so almost like out there. It can be hard to grasp a hold of, but we want to make it practical, honestly. But anyway, welcome back to the Yellow Podcast, on for part 2 of self-care and taking care of ourselves so we can take care of the people that we love. And again, the whole common sense and love thing. But let's just dive right in. What you said was so interesting to me. You said like building your routine is probably your most potent like example of showing self-love. Because I just thought about like, imagine the parable, building on sand versus building on the solid rock foundation, right? Leaving aside the spiritual implications of that, if you don't have routine, right, you end up mismanaging the things that you do to unwind, right? So you almost like you're trying to stand, but you're on stand that's shifting, right? you wanted to unwind, but it took too long, so now you didn't get to do the other thing that was important, or the other thing that you needed to unwind. So now you're sad because you didn't get to accomplish what you wanted to accomplish. Now you're crying, and now the sand's wet. Now the sand's wet, and now it's wet and sticky, and you're not standing on good sand anymore either way, right? But when you build a time framework that, just like you said, like you dose the things that you enjoy so that they can ultimately be for your benefit and not for your detriment.
When I'm thinking about like, I'm a speaker, y'all know that. And something that I often say is that all of us have a level or a measure of creativity. People tell me all the time, I'm not creative, but that's because we're comparing ourselves to the singers, the dancers, the actors, the people in the arts. But something I remember, we were having a team meeting at work, and my executive director, she's married, 3 children, husband's an architect, so on and so forth. And she was like, I got, y'all be so proud of me. So every Monday, I encourage everybody to do an affirmation. It's like literally what we do now. At the end of every meeting, we have like an affirmation for the week for ourselves. And so one of hers, I remember, she's like, I'm going to get more creative. And she's like, I just, I'm working so much, we're moving, just all this extra stuff. She's like, I want to do something that keeps me creative. And I remember I heard that, and I know Jasmine's pregnant. And I remember texting Jasmine or calling her, and I was just like, I want you to be intentional about finding something that is a creative outlet for you, whether it is, I don't know, like making a dress or going to a painting class or whatever the case may be. Like, I want you to like be able to, because she is a creative. So I remember, do you remember that conversation? And I was like, you got to do something creative. Because I heard my executive director say that. And I was like, I want Jasmine to, even while pregnant, just be feeling like, yo, I still can do this creative thing, you know what I mean? Where it's like giving me the functions of what I'm used to be doing, what I've used to do, or, so.
Yeah. Also, something else that you use to speak to something you mentioned. Let's see. I'm trying to think back. Talked about self. We were talking about indulgence.
I believe in you.
Thank you. Unwind. Oh, it just made me think about. Thank you for that encouragement, that affirmation. How in our youth we want, we look at adulthood as being so, I guess, lenient, but the key to adulting that we don't know then is, like you said, like managing that time, and we have to manage ourselves, and so that's usually my pep talk for collegiates going off to school. It's like, you're on your own. No one's looking over you. No one's telling you when to study. No one's, you do have that leisure of like, I can do this or I can do that. I can go where I want to go. And it's great, right? But knowing how to manage your time is a level of, it's very key to self-care, because whether it's your grades, whether it's your free time, that balance, right? And that's also real. Something else I thought of when you were talking, I was like, man, I thought about Adam and Eve and just the apple, or I shouldn't even say apple, the fruit. That was a boundary that God gave, and it just made me wonder, like, without the boundary, like the self-care, like I thought of that for some reason. Oh, because you were talking about parenting and having the routine or what have you. And so I'm thinking routine, I'm thinking guidelines or what have you, because at some point in our youth, we're thinking like, oh, our parents, the authority, like we just want to do what we want to do. But even on our own, we still have a level of responsibility and accountability if we want to function properly and get things done. We still need that. But I thought about that kind of being like the first thing that happened where there was a boundary, and the boundary was, compromise, and what that led to. So whether it's overindulgence, whether it's lack of self-care, whether it's compromising a boundary, the repercussions of that, and what the consequences. So
right,
yeah,
yeah. Being an adult is having enough rope to hang yourself with. Yep. Yeah. So the world is your oyster. Be careful.
Yeah. No, really.
Yeah.
I think we should think of like self-care as a holistic experience, whereas, it's, I mentioned on our last episode, that I have somebody in my life that I was like, oh, you don't love yourself. And, how would one know that they don't love themselves? I think it's when you don't like, I'm trying to like generalize it, right? Because there could be other people going through this and like, oh wait, I actually don't love myself. But not prioritizing like your mental health. What I mean by that is, we talked about, I think off air, we talked about like scrolling, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with scrolling if that's like your release at the end of the day or whatnot. But it becomes it can become problematic when you start comparing yourself. Like, I'm not good enough. I'm not this enough. I'm not that enough. Like, that's when it's like really, really bad. And unfortunately, a lot of individuals struggle with that. So I think that's kind of like thinking about it holistically. But the places around you, if that's kind of like not clean, I know it's not in the Bible, but cleanliness is next to godliness. I think it's something to be said about being in an atmosphere and environment where you can work, live, sleep, and it's clean. Also working out, or doing something that keeps you active. That, I think that's self-care, because you mentioned last episode, our body is our temple. Whether it's walking one day a week or, making sure you don't eat fast food every day of the week, like, that's going to be honoring your temple and whatnot. So I like us to think, from my last point, of about self-care and self-love as a creative journey, but also holistic experience. Because, you know, you can work out every single day, but still have no community and be isolated. Or you can have a great community and then come home and looks like hoarder episode or whatnot.
Yeah,
like, come on now. Like, let's just be real. Like, that's not like when you kind of let yourself go, emotionally, physically, spiritually. I think that is one telltale sign of like not loving yourself.
Right. So I think part of the self-love journey also, in the same line as mental health, is resolving what causes you conscious and subconscious anxiety.
Wow.
So I'll speak for myself. And like I when I was at school in Loma Linda, there's a certain road that had a certain dip, like a water channel, right? And you had to approach it slow, like at 10 miles an hour, right? But the rest of the road is like 30 miles an hour, speed limit, whatever. You're driving. For some reason, like my brain I found myself in survival mode a lot because of different sources of anxiety, right? So every time I would come to this bump, I would find myself, I'm driving too fast. I had to hit the brakes, like almost like right on top of the bump. Every single time. I lived there for 4 years.
Wow.
Almost every time I had to I'm reminding myself, but then something gets in my head and then my brain's going, maybe it's the ADHD. My brain's going and then I forget about the bump as I'm almost on top of it. Mm-hmm. A lot of the time, the barriers we have to understanding ourselves is due to like some deeper level of anxiety that we don't even know is below the surface. Because I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Like it was at a certain point where I'm like, something doesn't feel right. And I kind of started almost like diagnose myself with like perfectionism induced anxiety. And I went to a therapist for it. So we talked about it. And we understood a whole lot of other stuff. I kind of wish she was still my therapist because we had to move. But taking care of that inner part, that inner core of anxiety, like whatever you can do to shrink it, like anything.
Yeah, for sure. And the inner core of like mental health in general, because there are so many conditions that affect like your day-to-day life. Like that's actually one of the first signs of like a therapist realizing is that they ask you what is like what. How do I explain it? Like they ask like what is unearthing your normal routine. And so like one of the things like I don't mind sharing, like I have clinical depression and my therapist, like whenever I notice like I am moving back towards there, she puts me in like a very strategic, like you need to do this. You have to go to sleep at this time. You have to do this, because like when you are off, like the first thing that begins is that you're unearthed off of like your normalcy. And like you just don't take care of yourself as well. And so like mental health is a huge factor in like in self-care in general, because like sometimes like you just don't have it in you, and it's not even because of lack of love, it's because like of an underlying condition where like when you're depressed, before I was like initially diagnosed, I mean, I thought like I was sad because of circumstances, but in those situations, I didn't clean my room, like dishes get piled up because I literally like all of that feels like an energy draining, like Mercy. I literally like, I could not think I was gonna, like, my routine was just get through the day and go to work. When I get home, like my reward was being able to lay in bed and not having to do anything. Like it was a reward system I created for myself. But all of that it wasn't because like I was lazy. It wasn't because like I didn't want to love myself. It's literally because like there was an underlying reason why like I could not. And so like also even with ADHD or some of like the other conditions that you possibly could have, there's like, again, that's why there's so many levels to self-care, because I think sometimes like there can be this nuance of like, oh, you just don't want to love yourself, or you don't, like you don't want to honor yourself the way that God honors you and love yourself the way God loves you. But then also there are concrete reasons that like people don't. And then even in like, that's probably a whole other episode, but like what it looks like, the impact of like, of when you have issues and you're not dealing with them, how they can present themselves. And they present themselves in a number of different ways. Lack of, like we're saying, cleanliness, lack of love, the way that you treat other people, the way that you like, and you know, we all have professions, like, you know, like there was that mean teacher where you're like, she just was so mean, or a coworker that like they always have a bad attitude. And like the more you begin to love yourself, you're like, she probably has a lot of stuff going on herself, and that's why she treats people. That is a real thing, that people will genuinely like treat people badly or treat themselves badly because like they just don't have it in them to, you know, like our minds are just so complex. And so honestly, I don't know, like see somebody. Like if you are like hearing this episode and hearing the things that they're saying, or that we're all saying, and it's like, okay, like I want to love myself, but I don't have the tools, like figure out how to, like where to start with a routine. And if all of those things are not working, it might be time to assess like a deeper issue that could be going on.
And that's why I was saying awareness. Because sometimes if you're not aware of issues and how they manifest, right? And I was even thinking like square is not a rhombus is a square, you know, whatever the inverse is. How we love others may not always be an indicator, because we know like with the negative, right, that person's mean or what have you, but even if it's like the inverse of that, like where it seems on the outside that you're just meeting all this person's expectations or whatever the all of that, and it looks like I know how to love people, I know how to show up for people, I know how to, but you're the person that's suffering from that too. That can be, but you don't know, because if you're using the outer as the measurement, you're thinking you don't know. You think you're fine. So not knowing the manifestation of the issues. That's why I said it sometimes takes, unfortunately, like issues to then realize, oh, I may not love myself that much or am caring for myself. So
true.
Yeah, as a quick shout out to this current economic climate where people that are insured are also still underinsured. It can be expensive to go see somebody that is unignored, that is not being ignored at all. And I think it's gotten even worse in this present time, 2023, 2024, that period of time. So if it's not in the cards financially to go see somebody, which is the case for more than enough people, start with this. Understanding what, I guess, spikes your dopamine. The dopamine is a feel-good hormone, right? What can we do to have healthy, sustained levels of dopamine that are not harmful? So let's take, for example, social media scrolling. That's feeding dopamine. It's feeding. And that's why we get addicted to it, because literally it's continuous stimulation on stuff that doesn't really matter, you know? But how can we generate dopamine in a healthy way? Because when we have that core of healthy dopamine throughout our day, we don't need to overdose on our self-care. We can therapeutic dose on our self-care. So good, healthy forms of dopamine come, say, from exercise. You know, it's one of those things that when you don't feel like doing it, but when you do it, it makes you feel like doing it. It's like what we call a positive feedback loop. It's really, really kind of crazy. And also, well, good food, healthy food is,
my favorite.
Not too much sugar. Sugar will spike your dopamine too, so be careful with that. Right? But having good times with friends and family and help sustain those things. Quick, one last thing before we close up. If have you guys heard of like the hamster or the rat experiment with like, okay, there's a single rat by himself in a cage and they have 2 bottles of water. One with water, one with what? Heroin or something, right? The rat that's by himself with nobody else will default to the water that has the heroin in it. But put that same rat in an environment where it's surrounded by other rats. They can eat, they can have sex, they can run on the rat wheel, whatever. They're always going to pick the fresh water every time. They're not going to need the heroin water. They're not going to need the drug water, because they have what they need in their community, right? So just a plug, just a little Band-Aid, because we all should at least talk to somebody at least one good time to kind of, even if it's just to do a check-in, because we don't know, like there's a lot of burdens that we carry day to day as people, right? So it's just good. You don't have to do life by yourself. Right.
Nope.
That's really the core
I
of it.
have something I want to say to
please.
the listening audience. I'm looking to the camera. A late great GOAT by the name of Michael Jackson said, "You are not alone.
Oh my God.
We are here for you." And that's all I got. You got to pay for the rest. But if you're watching this,
Not
just
paid.
know
Sponsors.
that you're not alone.
Come on. Well, it's been a great episode, part 2. Thanks for joining again. As always, heal responsibly, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.